Hello, hi, Rosanna Berardi and Jennifer Behm from Berardi Immigration Law. Thanks for joining our webinar today. We are going to start in 1 minute. So get comfortable, get your lunch out, pour a cup of coffee. We have a lot to cover. And we pride ourselves in making these webinars short and sweet. Hopefully we'll be in and out in about 20 minutes, maybe 30, because there's a lot going on. Okay, 12:01. Welcome to the Berardi Immigration Trump 2.0 and U.S. Immigration Policy Change webinar. I'm Rosanna Berardi. I'm the managing partner here at the firm.
I'm Jennifer Behm. I'm a partner here with the firm.
And we are here to update you on all things Trump and immigration and Canada. There has been a flurry of activity in the last couple of weeks. And even for us that we deal with this day in and day out, it's been really challenging to keep up with actually what is going on. And we're seeing a lot of incorrect reporting in the media. So we're here today to tell you the truth and how it all works. And you'll see that we have a QR code on the screen once we get to the Canadian snowbird registration requirement. If you snap onto our QR code, we can do a free assessment to let you know if you're required to register. So Jen, why don't you tell us a little bit about Canada, snowbirds, and the rule that came out today in the Federal Register?
That's right. So a few weeks ago, Trump and USCIS announced a new registration requirement that follows one of Trump's executive orders issued within his first few days of presidency called Protecting the American People Against Invasion. It sounds really serious. The primary goal behind this registration requirement was primarily to encourage individuals who are here unlawfully to more or less self-deport themselves and to notify the government that they're leaving. But this has had a trickle-down impact, especially to our northern border friends, Canadians who enter through land ports of entry. And essentially, when a Canadian comes through a land port of entry, they aren't fingerprinted, they aren't getting a formal admission record, and that's been long-standing policy for years and years and years. Otherwise, we would have traffic lines backed up into Canada miles and for hours. But now this rule requires any Canadian who is coming through a land port without a work authorization or visa to register if they intend to stay in the US for more than 30 days. So this has a huge impact on the snowbird population and is causing quite a bit of flurry in the media. Rosanna, tell us a little bit about the headlines that we're seeing in Canadian media, where they're getting it right, where they're getting it wrong, and how Berardi immigration law can help.
So yes, there's been a lot of confusion because the general rule that is in today's Federal Register says that if you enter the United States for 30 days or more by land, you're required to register and be fingerprinted. However, there's one sentence that is buried in this rule that says if you are under 14 or a Canadian citizen, you are exempt from the fingerprint requirement. So unfortunately, a lot of the headlines that came out in Canada yesterday and this morning are saying Canadian snowbirds now have to register and be fingerprinted. That is factually incorrect, and I've actually reached out to the media to correct that. So what do you need to do? You need to register. Now, this sounds like a pain. And it's a government rule. And just fun fact, this is actually seeded based upon a law from 1940 called the Smith Act that was then incorporated into the Immigration and Nationality Act of 1952 that basically says the U.S. government can register or know who's in the United States at any given time. So unlike a lot of executive orders, this one's not going to be challenged. This one's in the Federal Register. It is on sound legal premise. Now, I know the Canadian Snowbird Association is asking DHS for clarification and trying to get them to waive the Canadian piece of this. I don't think that's going to happen. So if you're a Canadian that's driven across one of the land borders, you packed up your car January 1, you left the GTA, you crossed at the Peace Bridge, you told the officer, citizenship Canadian, where are you going? To our condominium in Boca Raton. When are you coming back? May 1st. Have a nice day.
Great day. Yep.
Away you went. You didn't get anything. Do not go on the government's website and look for your I-94 card. Those are not issued to Canadians that cross the border. So what do you need to do now? Well, if you're in the United States for 30 days or more, and this new rule was issued today, but it does go into effect April 11th. If you want to know if you are required to register, take a picture of our QR code in the corner, and it will ask you a series of questions. We'll have one of our lawyers review it. There's no cost to do this. And we'll tell you if you're required to register. And then if you are, you could take it upon yourself to do so. Or Berardi Immigration Law has a team of professionals waiting to help you register. The registration process is a bit clunky. You have to create an account on USCIS, and then actually the registration questionnaire is quite lengthy. I did it myself on Sunday night. It is up and available. If you wanted to get ahead of the game, you could technically do this today. And there's a lot of questions about your residency. And then there's a catch-all question that needs to be answered very carefully that talks about what are you doing while in the United States? And as immigration lawyers, every word matters. And we're really concerned about making sure that our clients are filling this application out correctly. So our role in the process is to help you determine A, do you need to register? And then B, do you need help registering? Once you're registered, the government will issue you a document via internet, and you can either download it as a PDF or print it out. You're required to carry it with you at all times.
Pretty wild. We're getting lots of questions about that registration rule. So again, to our listeners, please use that QR code for a free assessment. We have a lot of direction and instruction to provide, so we can certainly assist with that. Rosanna, we're not only getting a ton of questions about Canadian snowbirds and this new registration requirement, but also Trump's gold card for foreign investors. So the media loved this one when Trump first mentioned it. It sounds like he would offer a green card and path to citizenship for any foreign investor who's willing to invest $5 million into the United States. And the goal behind the gold card wasn't necessarily for economic development or straight immigration benefits. It's to help nail down and drill down the U.S. deficit. So working towards our federal spending. Where does the gold card stand today? Can President Trump execute such a program? And what do you think?
Yeah, so unlike what came out in the Federal Register, to me, the golden visa announcement came out on February 25th. It was really funny. It was like 8 p.m. I was getting a pedicure, and I get this notice on my phone that the U.S. is going to be selling green cards for $5 million. I thought it was a joke. So I think very hyperbolic rhetoric. People immediately were mad and said, you know, we shouldn't be selling green cards. Well, we do already. We actually have an investor visa program that's temporary, meaning if you invest a certain amount of money, you get to stay in the U.S. for a certain amount of time. And then we do have something called the EB-5 program, which requires individuals to make a large capital investment in underserved economic areas in order to get a green card. So we have these foundations. The golden visa, strictly from a business perspective, brilliant. It would wipe out our national debt, which is a total disaster. So definitely it makes sense on paper. The reality is, let's remember, three branches of government: executive, legislative, and judicial. The executive branch is unable to make a new category of law. Right. That's why we have Congress. So the whole, we're going to create this new golden visa. People are going to be able to invest $5 million. Unless Congress is going to do that, then we're not going to see this one. And nothing's come out since February 25th.
Right.
I think it's aligned with the Trump administration's promise to reduce federal spending, wipe out some of the debt, and at the same time fix immigration. So kind of killing a lot of birds with one stone. We haven't seen anything on this. And if we do, it's going to be challenged immediately. And people are definitely going to take issue. Courts are going to take issue with the fact if Congress wants to do this, and I just like to point out, we're almost 60 days into the administration. Congress has sat on their hands the entire time. They've not done a thing regarding immigration.
Yeah.
So that's what we see each and every administration.
Right.
Every administration does not touch immigration. This administration was elected based on immigration issues in the United States. And as a result, we're seeing a lot of this rhetoric and language. But if I had to bet money, I'm not going to bet on seeing a golden visa come out anytime soon.
Yeah, I have to agree with you. I was Googling this morning prior to our webinar, and there hasn't been anything really coming out. In fact, Trump seemed to walk back a few comments when he was asked in an interview a couple of days ago, because someone made the comment, well, hey, with the EB-5 program, there's a ton of fraud, and it's been difficult for the government to really look at source of funds and where individuals are coming in to get such money, making sure that they're playing by the rules, if you will. So how would the golden green card or golden card be any different from that? And someone had mentioned, what about the Chinese? They might use money to gain leverage in the United States. So I'm with you on that. I don't think we're going to see much come of it. So with that, let's dive into tariff policies. This has been one of the biggest ping pong battles that we've seen in the last few days. And it's been a pretty nasty match with our northern neighbors. So on March 8th, Trump announced a 25% tariff on steel and aluminum. On March 9th, Doug Ford imposed a 25% surcharge on electricity to certain states, including our very own New York. On March 10th, Trump retaliated with a threat to double down on tariffs on Canadian metals and dairy and the automotive industry. And then on March 11th, yesterday, Ontario pulled back on the electricity surcharge. Trump is simmering down on his comments. I guess, everyone is having some important conversations. So understandably, there's a lot of people, Canadians and Americans alike, who are very unsettled by all of this discourse. Our economy likes to be able to predict what's coming. And we feel like we're living in very unpredictable times right now, especially with these tariffs. So for our Canadian listeners, especially, do you have any recommendations, especially for those who have cross-border businesses? Because we know that they're definitely going to be impacted by tariffs if and when they do stick. And is there anything they could be doing now in advance to help secure their businesses and put themselves in a much stronger position than if they weren't?
Yeah, super complicated issue. It's been a wild game of ping pong. Who knows what's going to happen today? Yesterday, it was like every other hour it changed.
Yeah.
Bottom line is this. The Trump administration is very welcoming to businesses coming to the United States. We handle hundreds of investor visas every year. That's where a company either sets up shop in the United States and has the U.S. be their headquarters, or they buy something that exists. Why would we talk about that now? Well, we have a lot of people inquiring about, hey, I was going to set up my business in the U.S. anyway. 95% of my clients are in the U.S. How would this help me with the tariffs? Well, the way that it would help is that if you are physically present and you have a facility in the United States and you are shipping your goods or items from the U.S., you are going to save on the tariffs. You will not be shipping from a country that we've levied tariffs against. So we're getting a lot of calls also from businesses that are Canadian based that might want to open up a U.S. operation.
Yes.
That can be a workaround. And please know, we are not tariff experts. We're immigration. I can't say experts. We're really good at immigration. The New York State Bar Association doesn't allow us to call ourselves specialists or experts. But we know the immigration scheme inside and out and can certainly help you on that. So, Jen, we're getting a lot of questions from the Canadian snowbirds. So let's go back.
Yeah.
Let's go back to, I'm going to cover some of the basics. So we're going to go back to the top, take it from the top, the snowbirds. So who does this apply to? I'm going to be very clear here. If you are already documented, if you are an international student that has an F1, an E2, non-immigrant, if you're a green card holder, if you went through any process to apply for an immigration benefit, like a visa or a work permit or a green card, you are exempt. Why? Because this registration requirement is built into that process. Whether you know it or not, you probably do. The government is giving you background check. They're taking your photo. They're taking your fingerprints to create that work visa or work permit. So if you hold any type of formal immigration status, you're exempt. The
L1, TN, E2, E1, an EAD card. If you have an EAD card and you're in the US, you are exempt.
And also, people keep asking me, why does this not apply to people that fly into the United States? And the reason for that is when you fly into the United States, you are presenting yourself for inspection. In Canada, we have a concept called pre-flight, where if you come in through Pearson or Trudeau Airport or in Ottawa, you're speaking with U.S. Customs and Border Protection before you enter the U.S. You're giving them your passport, they're swiping it. And oftentimes they're putting in an address of where you're going. So you're essentially being registered and you're getting an I-94 stamp in your passport or in their computer system. Now, the I-94, people keep saying, I'm going to go online and get an I-94. You cannot. It can only be issued by Customs and Border Protection or a division of Homeland Security.
And one way to check if you have an I-94, if you're still unsure and you've driven across the border, you probably don't. Or if you've flown, you probably do. One way to check and be certain is to go online. This is public information that is specific to you as an individual because you put your passport information in. But the website address for that is i94.cbp.dhs.gov, G-O-V. That's i94.cbp.dhs.gov. And you can put your passport information in, your name, your passport number, and click on Get I-94. And if one was created for you, your travel information will pop up. And the purpose of an I-94, it controls the length of your stay in the United States. It will have your date of entry, and it will also have the day that you are permitted to remain in the US until. So for the default for a Canadian visitor, it's generally a 6-month period, although there are some cases where CBP may shorten that period of stay. If you do not have an I-94 and you cannot pull that record, you are most likely required to register.
And if you don't know and you don't want to go through all of that,
Contact
take a
us.
picture of our QR code and we'll tell you in 30 seconds.
Yes.
So we can definitely help you on that end. We're getting a lot of questions about what does this mean for Nexus holders? Happen to have my Nexus card right here. What does it mean? The answer is we don't know. The Federal Register is silent on Nexus entries to the United States. Now, I would think because of the information that's required to obtain Nexus, you're getting interviewed and vetted on the US and Canadian side that you would be exempt. However, we do not know yet. We're watching this very closely. When we find out whether Nexus applicants are required, we'll definitely release a video, we'll release a newsletter. But for today, we do not know about Nexus card holders, and we'll keep an eye on that.
I'm hopeful that we'll have a bit of a benefit for our Nexus card holders. And it is interesting because the registration requirement does exempt those who have a border crossing card. And that's primarily applies to Mexican nationals. So not that Nexus is the exact equivalent, but there is a similar screening process that's involved to get that benefit. So fingers crossed, we'll get some clarification on that.
And just know, so this rule that came out today isn't in effect for 30 days. And during that 30-day period, the government asks for comments. And a lot of times, the Snowbird Association or the Immigration Lawyers Association may write to the government and say, well, what about Nexus or what about this? And so the final rule that will be in effect on April 11th might look a little bit different. There might be some additional information, but Mark my words, this is not going anywhere. The general premise of this will remain. And I've done a ton of media interviews lately, and people keep asking me why. Why are Canadians being picked on? I don't like how this feels. Why? I'll tell you why. If you're looking at this purely from a border protection standpoint, the entry of Canadians to the U.S. has always been a bit of a loophole. I spent 5 years working at the U.S. Canadian border. And when I was an inspector, I probably admitted thousands of Canadians by saying, passport, good, bringing anything in? Nope, have a nice day.
Mm-hmm.
That's great. That's our relationship. That's what we're used to. However, if I was assigned from a law enforcement perspective to identify any weak points at the U.S. Canadian border, I would say, whew, we have millions of people roaming around and we don't know where they're going. And that's why this came out. This administration was elected based on immigration promises. And one of those promises was to secure the border. And it does feel a bit of ick because it also aligns with the threat of the 51st state, the threat of the tariff ping pong game. And now I've watched some interviews, I've talked to some Canadians, and they're like, why are we being picked on like this? I don't know. I don't operate at that high level, but this registration is firmly based in U.S. law. In other administrations, something like this would come out. There'd be a carve out for Canadians. There's always been a carve out for Canadians. There isn't right now. And I don't expect there to be in the future. So for Canadians, it's pretty straightforward. We are here to help. My concern about this registration rule is that this is going to hit mostly the snowbird community in the US. And snowbirds are typically 60s, 70s, 80s. There's a presumption here that everybody has their phone or a desktop in front of them. And for many elderly people, that's simply not accurate.
You do have to be a little tech savvy to work through and make that USCIS account. And that's where we can come in. We're happy to support those who are subject to the registration requirement. They can't quite figure out how to make their account. Lean on our team. We're here to support. But one thing we want to emphasize is don't ignore this rule. We're not sure how it will be actually enforced, but we do know that there are going to be monetary fines for noncompliance, possible prison time. I would imagine that's really for the most egregious offenders. But U.S. immigration is very unforgiving when it comes to noncompliance for any sort of immigration benefits. So what you don't want to do is put your head in the sand while you're on the beach, ignore this rule, leave, and then try to come back in winter again next year. And CBP could have the right to say, you know what, you didn't register last year, we're not letting you in. Sounds dramatic, sounds extreme, but they technically could enforce that immigration rule. So don't put your head in the sand. Use our free registration assessment, and we'll make sure that you are playing by the rules and help you get everything squared away for that.
In addition, regarding those penalties, I mean, the rule says the penalty for noncompliance is $5,000 or 6 months imprisonment or both. Pretty tough language, but they don't make rules without consequences. And in my opinion, the harsh rule is to encourage statutory compliance with the rules. So we've got to play by these rules here. And, we're going to see this moving on. Be thankful Canadians are exempt from the fingerprint requirement. That's a pain. But also remember that once you do this, you do have to carry proof of it. Are people going to come knocking on the door? Very unlikely. But what they could do is if you're speeding down I-4 in Orlando and you get pulled over by the Orlando police and they say, oh, you have Quebec license plates. What's your immigration status? And you say, oh, I'm Canadian. And they say, did you register?
Yeah.
And you're like, no. I think you'd get a slap on the wrist, but that's the context it could come up in. And speaking of the government, and I worked for the government for 5 years, if you call your local Customs and Border Protection Office today or USCIS, they're not going to know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
When these rules come out, literally the government agencies are the last to know. They're the last to know how they apply, and they're the last to know what to do. So please don't do what one of our clients did,
Yep.
and he was in Panama City, Florida, snowbird. The registration rule applied to him. He went into his local immigration office. They said, "Sir, what are you talking about?" And he said, "Well, I want to be registered." So they did biometrics, which they fingerprinted him. They took his photo and they charged him a fee.
Oof.
Now, no harm, no foul on his side. He's registered, but he didn't have to do all of that.
Mhm.
They should not have charged him. There is no fee from the government. Now, interestingly, the final rule says DHS is contemplating charging $30 for people that have to get fingerprinted. So it won't be Canadians, but there is that little threat. So we just have to make sure that we're responsible for our own actions. No discredit to the federal government at all. I've been there, I've done it, but they're usually the last to know. So people keep writing to us saying, "This isn't true. I went to my local border crossing. They said I was fine." This is true. It goes into effect April 11th. You don't have to do anything until then, but if you want to, you certainly can.
Right.
And we're definitely you're not able to register at the border crossing. So if you're going to pull up at the Rainbow Bridge in your vehicle and you're going to say to the officer, "I'm Canadian, I'm going down to Fort Lauderdale, I'm going to stay with my grandmother for 6 months, I want an I-94 card." First of all, you're going to get in a combative exchange because the officer's going to be like, "What?
Yeah.
No. Why do you want that?" And you're going to say, "Well, I have to register." And he's not going to know what to do. He'll probably send you inside where you'll wait for an hour. 6 people will assess the situation and send you
Maybe
on.
you'll get an I-94, maybe not.
Likely not, and send you on your way without your I-94. Don't do that.
Yeah.
Do it on your home computer. Do it on your iPhone. Do not try and get this through the U.S. government on the land borders. Airport travel completely exempt from this. So don't worry if you're flying into the United States. The government has what they need.
And remember, this applies for those staying for 30 days or more, right? So if you're coming in for a day trip to see Niagara Falls from the US side, or go shopping, or go to Disney World for a week, you don't need to do this. It's for longer term visitors.
Right. It's business as usual for the day-to-day or the weekly traveler. It's the 30 days or more. And business people, I caution you, 30 days goes by quickly. Sometimes you come in for a business trip and the next thing you know, you're attending seminars, or you're talking to people, you're negotiating contracts. This applies to you. So be careful on that front. Yes. And there are a host of regulations pertaining to what you can and cannot do as a business visitor. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out.
And that's where you want to be really careful with the particular question. What are you doing while you're in the United States, especially if you're here as a business visitor? One wrong word can really trip you up, and then ding, a red flag goes up with your name. So be very careful with that language, and we can help assess that and frame it in the proper context.
So we're at 29 minutes and 33 seconds. So this is the part where we thank you for joining us. We thank you for trying to figure this all out. This is a moving target. It's not going to end. This is going to evolve. It's going to change. It's going to shift. This rule will stay in place, but these types of things are here to stay. So be sure you follow us on social media. We're doing a ton of videos. We're doing a ton of outreach. We'll probably do another webinar in 2 weeks. Thank you for coming. That's 30 minutes. Thank you, Jennifer. And everyone, have a great day.
Enjoy.